Why did Ukraine give up its
Most
nukes? A short
countries that have
history.
nuclear weapons went to a great deal of effort to acquire them, and so the odds of them ever willingly giving them up are pretty slim, with some notable exceptions. So when you're a brand new country like Ukraine in 1991 and you've just been handed the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world, and thereby a boatload of clout.
Silly to do. Number one thing you got to do in that situation is figure out the codes, baby. Figure out how, those are your nukes now, okay? Those are your nukes. That was dumb. Bad decision. Bad decision. You know, hindsight's 2020, but if you were operating on the HasanAbi Piker's rules, 3 pivotal rules of nation building, you would have never given those nukes up.
Why would you give it up? Why did Ukraine disarm its nuclear weapons? So, to begin, when the USSR came down with a mild case of collapse, things like the armed forces, administration, and its industry were mostly divided up by whatever happened to be within the nation's new borders. And for Ukraine, as well as Belarus and Kazakhstan, this meant that they got to keep the nuclear weapons that the previous Soviet government had left on their soil. Now, when the USSR collapsed, there was a lot of discussion amongst the nuclear powers about how these new nuclear states would be treated, and importantly, how to get them to disarm. Belarus and Kazakhstan quickly made it clear that they didn't want to keep these nuclear weapons, and so they asked for help in getting rid of them. Yet, when it came to the subject of nuclear disarmament, Ukraine's new government wasn't saying much, and it became clear that its leaders were clearly thinking of keeping them. So why didn't they? Well, the first reason was the lack of political willpower. Ukraine's economy was firmly in the toilet in 1991. And so, maintaining a nuclear weapons program when people are struggling to find work isn't exactly a good look. There was a lot of pressure from opposition parties, the general public, and importantly the international community. And this plays into the second reason why, the United States. The Western powers had together created a series of large financial aid packages for the former Soviet states. And whilst many nations had no conditions on their aid, the American assistance had one caveat. No more nuclear weapons. America wanted this because it had just signed a series of nuclear disarmament treaties with the USSR, and Ukraine keeping them would have slowed any potential progress, because nobody knew if it actually counted towards Soviet disarmament or not. The third reason was that whilst the Ukrainian government could have maintained the bombs, creating a brand new nuclear weapons program from scratch would have been very difficult. They'd have gotten no outside help, and leaving a bunch of nukes on the shelf for 30 years without knowing how to handle them isn't exactly safe. To further make things more difficult, Ukraine didn't actually have the ability to use the weapon.
They would have zero chance in using/hacking USSR nukes. Come on, dude, espionage. I don't know. Send like a sexy honeypot woman, and then blackmail the nuke guy. You know what I mean? There's always a way. And even if you're not going to give it, the upkeep is worth it, dude. The upkeep straight up is fucking worth it. Because why? Rule number 1, get nukes. Never give up the nukes. Rule number 2, get nukes if you don't have nukes. Ukraine armed forces are now calling up people of any age to fight against the Russians. All you need to do is bring your passport and you're in, they say. They're doing an international call to arms. We're not going to see videos about nukes because people will freak out. Also, Hasan. No, we're looking at why Ukraine gave up the nukes, which was a big L, policy-wise.
Since things like armament codes and the know-how for launching ICBMs was the exclusive remit of the Moscow-based armed forces, and they weren't going to share. These could have been reverse-engineered eventually, but again, it was a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of political capital just to upset everyone.
Dude, it 100% would have been worth it. Ukraine's position in the global scale would be entirely different right now if they never gave up the nukes.
Why even consider keeping them at all? Well, it was because owning such weapons could essentially guarantee that you'd never be invaded, since the cost for the invader would be far too high. And for those who lived in Ukraine, there were fierce memories of the last time such...
That call to arms sounds like a bad idea in my opinion. I agree. Call to arms is never good because you're going to have like inexperienced people shooting at your own people on accident. You're going to also have very experienced people that should not be there at all doing God knows whatever the fuck. And ultimately, that kind of insurgency movement launched against the Russian military is only going to increase the brutality and make Russians treat every single fucking person like an enemy combatant. And God knows, now that the fucking Chechen brigades are moving in, they're probably going to see every person as an enemy combatant regardless. And by person, I mean little kids as well as adults.
An invasion happened. The world's powers understood this concern, and so they all came to an agreement. the Budapest Memorandum. This saw the USA, Russia, and the UK all agree to mutually respect the territorial integrity of these three states in return for their nuclear disarmament. This wasn't a defensive treaty, just a promise to agree that this was Ukraine and that the powers involved wouldn't use military or economic actions to destabilize it. The Ukrainian government accepted this and that sweet aid money quite happily, because its primary concern was that the United States would use economic sanctions against it, which this treaty protected against, with the backing of Russia, whom the Ukrainian government saw as a steadfast friend, since their only major post-Soviet disagreement by this point was about basing rights in Crimea, which fortunately would be sorted out pretty quickly and would never ever come up again. I hope you enjoyed this episode.
Yeah. Yeah. Never. That would never be an issue. Notoriously, totally. That age is like, no, he's being sarcastic. He made this video in 2021. Post the annexation of Crimea.